Marcus Rashford's Spanish adventure is coming to an end, and it's Serie A calling next. Mikel Arteta is lining up a raid on Real Madrid for one of their star names, and Unai Emery is leading the race to replace Carrick at United. All this and much more in today's episode. Let's try and get to 300 likes on this video, and I'll be back tomorrow with more transfer madness. Leave a like, and let's dive straight in. 12 goals and 13 assists in the current season for Barcelona, and the club still won't pay 30 million for a permanent deal. That tells you more about where Rashford stands than any stat sheet ever could. Barcelona did exactly what you'd expect. Took the player on loan, had a look, and quietly shut the door behind them. Not because Marcus failed, he didn't, but because the Catalans are currently slashing their wage bill with surgical precision, and 30 million euros for a winger approaching his 29th birthday is precisely the kind of expenditure they're running a mile from. The financial logic is crystal clear. Rashford worked perfectly well as a loan option, but a permanent investment is an entirely different conversation. So this summer, he heads back to Manchester United, where, by all accounts, nobody's exactly rolling out the red carpet either. And that's where Juventus walk in. The Turin side currently sit 4th in Serie A, fighting for a Champions League spot. And they're hunting a name, one that can give their attack both presence and pace in the same package. Rashford fits the profile on paper: quick, capable of operating across the entire front line, and technically versatile. The interest from Italian sources is being described as very much genuine. The question, as ever, isn't about desire, it's about money. 11 million euros a year is a wage Juventus simply cannot carry alone in their current situation, which is precisely why the structure being discussed involves a loan with an option or obligation to buy, alongside partial wage subsidization from United's end. In other words, Manchester United would effectively be paying to get rid of their own player, and apparently, they're perfectly comfortable with that arrangement. And that detail is worth sitting with for a moment. When a club is prepared to keep covering a portion of a player's salary after shipping him off to a different league, it means one thing and one thing only: he doesn't fit the plan so categorically that any arrangement which removes him from the wage bill is considered a net gain. For United, this isn't a transfer, it's a clearance. For Juventus, it's a chance to bring in a recognizable name with minimal upfront outlay. For Rashford, it's a third top division experience in 3 seasons, and another shot at reinventing himself, this time in black and white. Whether a real deal actually materializes depends entirely on how far United are willing to go on the salary contribution. If an agreement is reached, Rashford ends up in Turin. If not, the whole story just keeps turning on the same axis. New name, new interest, new window, same uncertainty. £52 million for Eduardo Camavinga. That's not a closing time discount. That's the asking price. Real Madrid are prepared to hear this summer. According to Core Offside, Arsenal and Manchester United have already positioned themselves at the front of the queue, while the rest are still sizing up the situation. In Madrid, Camavinga is still valued, but valued the way you value a master key: fits every lock in the building, owns none of the rooms. The problem is that versatile players without consistent game time eventually stop developing and start standing still. At 23, sitting on the bench, even at Real Madrid, is a risky long-term strategy. Your potential plateaus and your market value starts counting down. His contract runs until 2029, which gives Madrid the leverage to dictate terms, but there's no logic in dragging it out. The longer Camavinga doesn't play, the harder it becomes to justify a proper fee. Arsenal and Manchester United have both approached this without the usual transfer window theatre. Sources are describing their interest as the most concrete of anyone involved. Both clubs have spent the last few seasons struggling to find the right balance in midfield. Arsenal have the control, but lack athleticism under pressure. United are the opposite. Plenty of physicality, very little composure on the ball. Camavinga offers both in a single player. He receives the ball in tight spaces without panicking, turns in one touch, and still has the engine to cover the full width of the pitch. Chelsea and Spurs are showing measured interest, watching but not yet moving. PSG are in the conversation too, though that feels more like courtesy to a compatriot than genuine intent. No formal bids have arrived yet, but once the summer window opens properly, expect offers in the 50 to 55 million range. Right, while the big clubs are busy packing their briefcases full of cash, I've got a far better deal for you. A like on this video costs exactly £0, which in the current transfer market is basically daylight robbery. I know there are those of you watching in complete silence, hoarding likes as though you're planning to exchange them at the end of the season for a stake in Arsenal, or at the very least, a Camavinga autograph. Spoiler, that scheme doesn't work. So, don't wait for deadline day, hit the button right now. Here's the real irony though, Real Madrid aren't offloading Camavinga because they don't rate him. They're doing it because they're clear-eyed enough to recognize that the lad needs a change of scenery. And England right now is the most natural destination, not purely because of the money, though that's hardly unwelcome. It's about the style, vertical, intense, with constant physical battles through the middle. Camavinga won't drown in that environment, he'll thrive in it. The question that hasn't been fully answered yet, does he arrive as a guaranteed starter or as a well-funded rotation option? Arsenal have operated their transfer business with remarkable precision in recent seasons. Every signing has either slotted in immediately or revealed unexpected depth. Camavinga doesn't strike you as a player who'll quietly accept sitting and waiting, and if this move happens, particularly to Arsenal, it won't just add quality to the squad, it could reshape the identity of the team entirely. Not through the weight of a famous name, but because you'd suddenly have a central midfielder capable of breaking opposition lines and covering his own backline in the same passage of play. Or, of course, it could just end up being another transfer that gets filed away a year later under "remember when they were after him." Paris Saint-Germain have held talks with representatives of Gabriel Martinelli, and that fact alone tells you quite a lot about where PSG are heading this summer. But the devil, as always, is in the detail. According to L'Équipe, PSG scouts have been making an increasing number of in-person visits to stadiums, not to verify statistics, but to assess something that no spreadsheet captures: psychological composure under real pressure. Put simply, Paris want to know how Martinelli handles himself when a match actually matters. For anyone who's followed Arsenal closely over the last 2 seasons, the answer is fairly obvious. The Brazilian is precisely the sort of player who steps up when the stakes are highest. Here's what's happening inside PSG right now. The message coming out of the club is that they're not interested in collecting players for the sake of numbers. This isn't just polished PR language. It's a direct consequence of how Paris have been building their squad in the post-Mbappé era. They need players with defined functions, not marquee names who simply occupy space on the wage bill. Martinelli fits that logic. Pressing intensity, intelligent off-the-ball movement, a constant threat on goal, it's exactly the profile around which their new system is being constructed. For Arsenal, though, all of this reads more as an indicator than an actual threat. A club that has built a clearly defined project and maintained genuine squad continuity across multiple seasons isn't about to dismantle it for the sake of a single offer. Martinelli isn't some replaceable component. He's a fundamental part of the mechanism Arteta has spent years building. Selling him doesn't just mean losing a player. It means fracturing the entire logic of that left flank. The more pressing question is, what happens if PSG move from observation to concrete figures? Their summer strategy remains open-ended for now. Internal contract negotiations, potential departures, all of it feeding into a budget that nobody's seen yet. Right now, this is interest, not an offer. And in the transfer window, interest is a currency with a very short shelf life. Christian Romero is the captain of a sinking ship, and Tottenham, it seems, are already exploring a lifeboat at 60 to 65 million euros, just one destined for someone else's harbour. According to Court Offside, the club are prepared to let the Argentine go this summer if an offer in that range arrives. And with 3 years still left on his contract, that position speaks volumes. This isn't really about Romero himself. This is about the fact that Tottenham currently sit 18th in the Premier League, in the relegation zone, and the club's hierarchy are already planning the summer as though the championship isn't a catastrophic scenario, but a perfectly workable starting point for a rebuild. Selling your captain while fighting for survival isn't a panic move, It's a signal. The dismantling has begun, and it's going to be significant. Atletico Madrid under Simeone have been monitoring Romero for several months now, and the Spanish side are reportedly ready to accelerate their interest, specifically if Spurs do drop into the second tier. The logic is straightforward. Relegation dramatically simplifies negotiations. The club loses leverage, the player loses patience, and 60 million shifts from a starting point to a ceiling. Manchester United have also been identified as an interested party, with Romero described as an appealing option should he become available. That said, United are currently consumed by the search for a permanent manager. Matthijs de Ligt remains in an uncertain position. Talks over Everton's Branthwaite are ongoing in parallel, so their stance right now resembles a man carefully studying a restaurant menu without being entirely sure he's coming to dinner at all. What's really telling here is this: Tottenham are actively open to selling their captain at the very moment the club is scrapping for its top-flight life. And this isn't a disgruntled agent leaking to the press, it's the club's own position. Whatever happens between now and the final whistle of the season, it's going to be a very restless summer in North London. Unai Emery arrived at Aston Villa in 2022, and since then, the club have finished in the top 7 in every full season under his management. Not once, not through a fortunate run of fixtures, every single time. Now they're looking at a top 5 finish and another Champions League campaign. All of this is happening in Birmingham, a city where just a few years ago, the conversation was about staying up, not European football, which is precisely why his name is now being spoken in corridors well beyond the walls of Villa Park. According to Team Talk, intermediaries are actively promoting Emery's candidacy to elite clubs, and Manchester United are among those with whom contact has been made. In the same breath, Nagelsmann and Iraola are being mentioned, so United clearly aren't setting the bar modestly. And running alongside all of this, Real Madrid are reportedly keeping a close eye on the Spaniard, a club currently operating with Arbeloa as a temporary measure and making no great effort to hide the fact that they need something considerably more permanent. United's position is an interesting one. On the one hand, there's Mikel Carrick as interim manager. Sources pointing out that no manager has accumulated more Premier League points since his appointment. That's not a throwaway stat. It's an argument for continuity, and the club know it. On the other hand, Emery offers something fundamentally different, a proven track record of building structure where none existed, instilling discipline without stripping a team of its personality, and making a club identifiable and coherent in tactical terms. That kind of tactical identity is something United lost a long time ago, and its absence has arguably been the most painful thread running through their recent years. There is, of course, a counter-argument. Manchester United have historically defined themselves through attacking, front-foot football, and Emery's approach, for all its effectiveness, is built primarily on control and structure. That's not necessarily a contradiction, but it is a question the club will eventually have to answer honestly. What matters more, a recognizable identity or measurable results? Given what's happened over the last several years, the identity has already been so thoroughly eroded that the question may well have answered itself. Speaking of intermediaries pushing candidates, YouTube's algorithm is out here trying to push my videos into your feed. And judging by the fact that you're still watching, it's doing a better job than Villa's defense on an off day. Since you're already here, perhaps it's time to stop lurking in the shadows? A subscription and notifications switched on. That's the only way to guarantee we meet again next time around. And I promise my contract with you won't cost 20 million quid. Aston Villa, for their part, are projecting composure. Contract through to 2029. The board insisting the manager is going nowhere. European football confirmed again next season. All of it sounds entirely convincing, right up until the moment an offer arrives that makes conviction considerably harder to maintain. Emery is currently at precisely that point, where his value is obvious to everyone except, perhaps, the one party who may end up paying the least for it, because the party, who already has everything they need to keep him, is also the one who'd have to let him walk.